Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down Diamonds Are Forever.
Diamonds are forever. They are all I need to please me. They can stimulate and tease me. They won't leave in the night. I've no fear that they might desert me.
After stepping away from the franchise, Sean Connery's back as James Bond for the very last time. For the last time, he means it this time. I kind of see this as the equivalent of bringing Robert Downey Jr. and the Russos back to Marvel. They were clearly trying to repeat the success of Goldfinger and had the same director, same Bond, same writer, and same singer. But did it work? Well, throughout this video, we'll be going through the movie and breaking it down scene by scene. Will this be a rough diamond or a diamond in the rough that sends off Connery with his pièce de résistance?
The pièce de résistance.
Well, that's what I want to discuss, and we'll also be going through the book as well. With that out of the way though, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Diamonds Are Forever. Now, as for where I'm coming in on this one, this was one of my least favourite films and books in the series. Felt like Fleming was kind of just spinning his wheels, and I got the feeling when reading it that he'd completely run out of road. It was his fourth in the run, and come Russia, we end with him seemingly killing off the character. Now, as you mentioned on that breakdown, that was the book that gave him a second wind. However, coming before this, felt like it killed it for him, which is something I feel when reading it. I think that feeling is also something that was happening when they were making the film as well. The producers and everyone involved, they were all just kind of dragging their feet. Whereas the team had a blast making Thunderball, at this point, tensions were frayed. Connery had been replaced and then Lazenby turned down the sequel. The producers couldn't live with their failure, and where did it bring them? Back to him. And to be fair, Connery was like,
"How much money have you got? Because this is going to cost you."
They agreed to his $1.25 million salary and said the next film would be his choice. Now, Connery had come from a working class background and had been through the struggles of moving to Hollywood. So he used the money to set up the Scottish International Education Trust. This was something where Scottish people could apply for funding, and it meant that they didn't have to leave the country to make it in the arts. But obviously, he wasn't too happy with the producers, and both were kind of just doing it because they needed each other. I feel like that comes across in the movie, and like Fleming, everyone was just doing it to do it. However, I have lessened on the film and book quite a bit. After revisiting them for the video, I think there's actually a lot to like. Where that ranks, we'll talk about it later, but that making up was pretty insane. Now obviously, this movie was the first Bond film of the 70s. Goldfinger had popularized the spy genre and made it massive in the 60s. However, there was the worry that it wouldn't survive the turn of the decade. Just like how we have people talking about superhero fatigue these days, back then the genre was overstuffed. There's Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Avengers, not that one, Mission Impossible, and also The Saint, on top of countless other ones that we've since forgotten about. The Saint of course featured Roger Moore though, and Mission Impossible of course got a revival down the line. But things were kind of on the out, and it felt like these properties didn't have that license to thrill the audience, you could say. Thank you very much. So obviously you go back to what works. But there was some experimentation at first. Roger Moore was asked, but he was busy with a persuader, and John Gavin actually signed on to the role. Yes, he was contracted to be James Bond in this movie. The actor was a massive part of Psycho, and I could definitely see him playing the part. However, United Artists head David Picker felt Sean Connery was a much more safe bet. Gavin was then promised Live and Let Die, and the producers even honored his contract on this one. So he still got paid either way. Obviously though, when you have so much changing behind the scenes, then your scripts are going to constantly be in flux as well. Richard Mapleman had actually started working on this film all the way back on Her Majesty's Secret Service. That film closed out with them announcing Bond would be back in Diamonds Are Forever, and they wanted to take the spy to America. Now in this, Bond was on a quest for revenge and hunting down Bunton Blofeld. Aided by Draco, it would be a cold thriller. The scene included Bond mourning his wife to all the time in the world and would get moments shot in India and Thailand. However, this failed to impress the producers, and when the actor changed, they decided to go in another direction. So though Bond's hunting down Blofeld at the start, he doesn't really seem that arsed about his dead wife. Kind of reminds me of Austin Powers when he's just like, oh well, I'm single again. This was them just going with the safe bets though and trying to roll back the darker tone. The plan was to just do what works, and they were adamant to recreate Goldfinger. As mentioned earlier, everyone was back, and they even wanted Gert Frobe to return as well. We have touched upon how the James Bond archive discussed how they wanted Goldfinger's twin brother for the last one. That's also something they wanted here as well. He'd be seeking revenge for the death of his brother and would do this through a laser-mounted supertanker. However, Cubby Broccoli had a dream one fateful night. He had a vision of Howard Hughes being the villain. Now, whether this next bit was a dream or if it actually happened has kind of been lost to the legend. But the story is that Cubby had a flight over Las Vegas and he looked down to see Hughes's penthouse. Cubby looked in the window to try and spot his friend, and he saw someone else instead. This is where the idea of an imposter came from. From here, they basically brainstormed Willard White, and Tom Mankiewicz was brought in to rework the script. Since Majesty's disappointed at the box office, they wanted to do something big to win back the US audience. Mankiewicz was American, and Broccoli brought him in because he could add a more accurate flavor to Las Vegas. Hughes at this point was also seen as a recluse, and The Aviator kind of documents his descent into isolation. So even today, Hughes is still a figure of fascination. Played by Jimmy Dean, he actually worked at Hughes' hotel, the Desert Inn, which the hotel in this movie is based around. So that's what they kind of work towards, and the city's of course a major part of the film. They filmed mostly at hotels owned by Hughes, and he basically rolled out the red carpet. Apparently when they arrived, Hughes rang down and said, give them whatever they want. Sounds like a complete blast, and Connery said he pretty much didn't sleep and that they shot almost every night. During the day, he'd go off and play golf, bet, and basically drink away the time. It's kind of crazy looking at him here though and seeing how much he's aged since we saw him in You Only Live Twice, which was just 4 years prior. Guy'd been drinking quite a lot, and it does kind of show on screen. Don't want to slag the guy off, mate, because he was clearly enjoying himself, but he was just 41, and then when they brought in Roger Moore for Live and Let Die, he's 45, so you can see the difference. And that's not just because they're different people. I actually think Come Never Say Never Again, though, that Connery looks a lot younger, despite being 9 years older there than how he is here. And look, I know it's a weird thing to mention in a review, but every review I've seen talks about it, so I'm gonna do it as well. And they're mostly better than this one too. Now, Connery apparently also had 2 affairs on set. Not only did he date Jill St. John, but he also gave Lorna Wood plenty O'Toole. He gave her a lot of wood. He gave her plenty O'Toole, because she plays plenty O'Toole. Nah, but the next part of the video is going to delve into the real life story behind the pair, and trust me, gets absolutely insane. Jill was originally cast as Plenty, but on assistant producer Sidney Korshak's advice, she was bumped up to the main role. Wood was picked up after modeling for Playboy, and the two ended up having a decades-long feud. That was not only down to them both banging Connery, but also because of what happened after. In a bitter twist of irony, Lorna's sister Natalie Wood drowned in 1981. Natalie was married to Robert Wagner, and they were on a boat trip with Christopher Walken. After Natalie's death, Wagner and Jill St. John started dating just 3 months later. Wagner would then later star in the James Bond parody Austin Powers, but there's still an ongoing investigation about his involvement in Wood's death. That was listed as drowning and other undetermined factors, and it's still considered unsolved, with people online even theorizing that Wagner played a part in it. During 1999, there was a Vanity Fair shoot which brought together most of the Bond girls. Photographer Annie Leibovitz asked them to take a photo together, and then St. John apparently tore Woods apart. Since then, the rumors have been that it was Wagner who nixed the idea because he didn't want his current wife and former sister-in-law doing a photo together, even if they were in the same movie. Wood then crashed a benefit for St. John in 2016 and publicly confronted Wagner about her sister's death.
Why won't you speak to the detectives? They're super guys.
Lana,
Clear yourself if you can.
Why would you even bring up anything like that?
Because
You
I'm
realize what
hounded
you've
with
done?
it every single day.
Do you realize what you've done?
No, what have I done?
Do you know we have a family? Do you know what you've done to the
Yes.
family?
Yes, I know. I'm not a part of it, thank you. But yes, we have a family.
I'm amazed that you'd even talk to me.
Why wouldn't I talk to you? I've known you since I was a
No,
child.
I've known you since you were a
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
What,
Who's he
can they
for
go
here?
away? I don't know. young man.
Anyway, I have talked to everybody. What do you
I don't know,
accuse
Kevin
me
and
of-
Ralph, I don't accuse you of anything.
You accuse me of murdering her, of taking all these positions. It's incredible. I can't believe that you'd do something like that. I just can't believe it.
But RJ, you've changed your story.
I haven't changed
You've never
anything.
said anything to me.
I have never changed anything.
You never for 1 minute stopped and said, this is what happened. I know it's going to
course I
hurt
did.
me. Not to me.
Of course
Not
I've,
to me, you
of course I
didn't.
have stopped and said what happened.
No, RJ, you
There
really
was
didn't.
everybody
You
was on
really
top of
didn't.
that. Look at all these people around here. They're
Oh,
all from you.
Jesus Christ, no.
Oh, I can't believe it.
So yeah, absolutely insane, and since then Woods has urged him to come clean. This led to threatening phone calls to Woods from a mysterious woman saying lay off Wagner or something bad might happen. Woods said it wasn't St. John, but the police still followed up with her. Jill then slammed the door in their face, and Wagner refused to answer any questions. Jumping forward to 2018, Woods was interviewed by Megyn Kelly. When asked if she thinks Wagner murdered her sister, she then replied with yes. The video has since been taken down though, which might be due to legal reasons. In 2022, Wagner was cleared of any involvement, but Woods still hasn't received closure on what happened. Which is an insane segue, but that now takes us into the movie.
Where is he?
Now Connery once more returns in the gun barrel. This again is in black and white like He Only Lived Twice, but I'm still unable to find out a reason for this. Because it was shown in colour for Thunderball, I know that! I did wonder if it was similar to how the gun barrel was used in Casino Royale, you know, when Daniel Craig did it, where it was black and white and the blood was the first bit of colour that we see. That obviously came down the line, but knowing they did that for a specific reason makes me retroactively think, was it because of that? And let me know below if you know. I can imagine at the time though, this was a big way to start the movie and telling audiences that James Bond was back. This is the last time we'll see Bond wearing a hat though, as they stripped it from Moore to differentiate him from Connery. So it really is the end of an era.
Where is he? I shan't ask you politely next time.
The pre-title sequence doesn't pull any punches either, and we immediately begin with a brutal Bond beating up the bad guys. This includes him going around the world on the hunt for Blofeld. Where we begin is in Japan, and you could easily see this as completely skipping out Majesties. You Only Live Twice, of course, ends in that country, and we pick up here in Japan, which I do think was a way the producers intentionally tried to decanonize the previous film. Bond's wife is never mentioned, and Irma Bunt is bunted right out the story. Considering she was the one who technically pulled the trigger, you'd expect her to be a target. However, as we mentioned last time, Il Steppard sadly died right after the movie was completed, and they didn't really want to recast her.
Hit me.
Now, when I was a kid, right, I used to go to my church every week, and we had this big church fair where people would sell stuff in stalls. I remember that I bought the VHS for about £2 and immediately got home and watched it. Hadn't seen it before, and I remember this opening being so jarring that I actually thought the tape was fake. It was £2, it was too good to be true. I rang my grandma to complain, like, the church has ripped me off. Bear in mind I was 7 years old, but yeah, put it back on and then realised this was actually how the movie was made. At the time, I thought it was very jarring, but these days, I actually quite enjoy it. Bond's kept faceless and constantly on the attack, following a string of people as he gets towards the villain. That thematically also sets up the plot of the movie. Bond follows the pipeline to get to Blofeld, and ultimately Blofeld gets away in the end, which is basically the entire film happening right in the pre-title sequence. Finally, we get the reveal of Sean Connery, and he drops this iconic line.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
Now if that sounds a bit off, it's because we know they sped it up, as the original version was actually shown in the trailers.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
This was around the time where they thought speeding stuff up made it more exciting, so I think they just went with that. But yeah, you can see how Kid Spoilers was like, it's a fake! Bond then strangles a woman with her bra, and this is Denise Perrier, aka Miss World 1953. Might have to censor this because there's a little slip of nipple, but through this, he's finally able to get Blofeld. Played by Charles Gray, he comes over from You Only Live Twice. There the actor played Charles Dicko and was killed during the first act. Now as a kid, I always thought Blofeld took on the face of an ally, so it would throw Bond off on a psychological level. However, this issue's never addressed, though it's always been part of my headcanon. What they do though is explain Blofeld's recast through the plastic surgery.
Phase 4, the nose. In my opinion, the most difficult part of a plastic transformation.
This was a newly emerging procedure, and it allowed Blofeld to appear more like how he's described in the Majesty book. I love how it kind of retcons the recast and gives us a reason for why he keeps changing. Because yeah, at this point we'd had 3 actors playing him in the last 3 movies, plus all the other ones where it was different actors doing the voice. Bond then sneaks into the lab disguised as a doctor, and this film actually has the most disguises that Bond adopts in a film. He has this, Peter Franks, the scientists at Area 51, and overall is constantly changing costumes. Bond then quickly dispatches the fake Blofeld and dunks him in a big brown bath of molten mud. This was actually instant mashed potatoes though, which were easy to film around than boiling hot mud. Apparently though, it stunk worse than a screen crush joke, and under the hot lights was rotting and melting away, which wasn't very good for those on set. Bond's then caught, and I love when they try to disarm him that he's got a gadget mouse trap in his top pocket, which is ridiculous, but pretty funny as well. Oh! Due to the clay that they have on the Blofeld models and the guy being bathed in it, I did used to think this was what they used to change his appearance. However, this is sort of based upon a scene from the book in which Bond takes a mud bath. This is so he can go and meet a jockey who'd been working with to throw a race. Upon taking a bath alongside him, Wint and Kidd enter and brutally torture the jockey in front of him. They severely burn him and basically make a big entrance. Going down in chapter 13, Fleming talks about the sulfur, seedy offices, and the very cold reception. It makes it seem like he definitely visited one in real life and used this for inspiration. What really annoys Bond though is that they harm the staff, and this makes him have a vendetta against the gang. It's described horrendously, with them all standing back as the jockey wheezes in pain. As soon as they leave, the staff then race to help him out and dry his eyes before it crusts away and dries. It just highlights how ruthless the mob is, and in the movie, Bond then beats the bad guy and sends him to a muddy grave.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.
We then see Blofeld's cat and zoom in on the diamond collar around its neck. We then hear the theme tune for the movie, which has now become synonymous with jewelry adverts. Which, hey, even if you clip this cat, you've potentially got one. Now, as much as that sounds like a diss on the song, I absolutely love it. Shirley Bassey is the voice of Bond, and I think this cements her as one of the greats. Though, yeah, it's been used over and over again in tacky commercials, it's a perfect song about luxury and obsession. I've always loved the Bond songs when they focus on an object or a person and kind of serenade them or it. Whether it's Goldfinger loving gold or The Spy Who Loved Me, I love when the singer rattles off how much they love it. Bassey basically just downplays everything else and sings about how diamonds are forever, forever, forever. Now the title was apparently spotted by Fleming when reading a magazine. Seeing diamonds are forever, he learned it was a common catchphrase when selling jewelry. This also somewhat makes its way across to the book. There Bond leaves the House of Diamonds and spots the words engraved on a plate. Come the end of the book, Bond and Tiffany talk about their future and how both want to be together forever and ever, forever, forever, you know the words. However, upon entering the bathroom in his cabin, Wint or Kidd say, "Mister, nothing is forever, only death is permanent. Nothing is forever except what you did to me." Bond then kills him in a scuffle, and the book culminates with him remembering the look across his dead face. He thinks about how the man had been wrong and that death is forever, but so are diamonds. This somewhat inspired the 1992 novel by John Gardner called Death is Forever. The love song though, especially with the 4K Dolby Atmos mix, there's just such a sultry side to it, and it's one of my favorite songs thus far. The titles themselves have this dreamlike quality, and it's some of Maurice Binder's best work. Overall, this is a brilliant start, and it's here we segue to learn more about the diamonds. Meeting Sir Donald, we then get what many fans refer to as a fourth wall break.
You've been on holiday, I understand. Relaxing, I hope.
Oh, hardly relaxing, but
Most satisfying.
So big shout out to Dutch Bond fan for discussing the theory that this is a big fourth wall break. Fans in the Bond community have often taken this as being the producers basically acknowledging that Connery's been away or on holiday.
Not quite.
I think that might be people reading too much into this stuff, especially after the intro, but if it's a fourth wall break, I appreciate it's not exactly on the nose in the way that on Her Majesty's Secret Service was, much more subtle than that.
This never happened to the other fella.
In the book, Bond's just been on holiday to France and he finally feels like he's at his peak. His last medical score's great, but M warns him he'll need to be at his best.
Don't cock it up.
In the movie, he and M have a little back and forth about the sherry, and yeah, it's a nice bit of surrogate father and son stuff where Bond shows off his knowledge.
1851. Unmistakable.
Sir Donald then tells him about the diamond smuggling pipeline, and this scene's ripped right out of chapter 2, where we begin with Bond and M observing a diamond up close. Bond never really got the love for them, but seeing it through a magnifying glass changes his perspective.
Priceless.
He sees the rainbow-like colour, beauty, and how even the roughest dark diamond shines with a bright heart. Kind of sums up the double-sided nature of this story and how everyone's putting on a facade. Bond pretends to be a smuggler, and Tiffany Case isn't as loyal to the mob as she initially seems.
I'm cooperating, Mr. Leiter. Really, I am.
Nothing hides in the heart to hurt me, you could say. In the work, we then learn that the UK makes £50 million a year from diamonds, $2 million being smuggled out the country, which is vastly wrecking the economy. Fleming's books often centre around smuggling rings, and whether it's the gold in Goldfinger, the coins in Live and Let Die, or what they do here, he was clearly fascinated by these black markets. Now, Fleming became absolutely obsessed with these criminal pipelines. A lot of his work centers around smuggling, and it's a clear theme throughout the Bond books. For example, Live and Let Die is about smuggling rare coins in the bottom of fish tanks, and Goldfinger's about, well, smuggling gold, and he loves gold, as they say. Now, while writing Moonraker, he came across a story about diamond smuggling. His friend was also the head of MI5, and he started telling him about the gangsters that ran it. And Fleming was shocked. In the book, Bond remarks, "I used to think your gangsters were just a bunch of Italian greaseballs who filled themselves up with pizza pie and beer all the week, and on Saturdays knocked off a garage or drugstore, so as to pay their way at the races." This reflected Fleming's view in real life, and his comments are quoted as being not too dissimilar to Bond's. However, he realised this entire operation was a machine, one so sophisticated it had managed to evade the FBI for decades. Fleming was obsessed, and he did an insane amount of research. There was so much left after this book that he actually went on to make another non-fiction book on top of this called The Diamond Smugglers. Because of that, all of these aspects feel extremely authentic, and it was during a time where people were obsessed with gangsters. Now that takes us to a section based off the opening of the book. It actually starts off from the perspective of a scorpion who's leering on the edge of a hole in the moonlight.
The scorpion.
Mother Nature's finest killer, Mr. Wint.
One is never too old to learn from a master, Mr. Kidd.
The scorpion surveys the land and wonders whether it's better to go out or remain in safety. Then it spots a beetle. Ultimately, greed wins over fear. The scorpion looks about the land it lives in and hears this constant rhythmic thumping in the background. All of a sudden, it's smashed with a stone, and we pull out to get the perspective of a man. He'd been watching the creature and killed it. We then learn about the dig site, and a helicopter swoops down, which we join the perspective of next. He talks about viewing the site from the air and how it sort of looks like a giant bug. So again, it's carrying on that notion of something higher up striking something below it. Something higher up the food chain has much more power, and they'll often take out anything below them. This is of course brought over to the movie as we have the diamond exchange in the night. In the book, we then learn the dentists are in on it too, and the diggers take the diamonds in their mouths and then go to the inspection. The dentist then offers them a price, and they have to say yes because there's no other way to smuggle it out. The dentists then take it and don't report it, which is also a scene that we get beautifully in the movie. They even have secret compartments to hide stuff. In the book, the pilot then mentions that things are getting too hot. Since the racket's picked up, punishments have doubled, and some people have even fell into the crushers. They fell in, they weren't pushed. The government is now closing in though, and thus the smuggler wants an extra 20%. The handover is pretty straightforward in the book though, with them basically just doing the deal. However, the movie changes things up and gives us a real sting in the story. Wint and Kid intercept the deal and kill a dentist through using the scorpion from the book. They then go and meet the helicopter pilot and send him off with a bang. Now originally they shot a version where they put the scorpion in the dentist's mouth, which played into the idea of him being a diamond dentist. However, director Guy Hamilton felt it was way too violent and thus toned it down to where they just drop a scorpion down the shirt. Now, Wint and Kid come directly from the book, but they change a couple of aspects about them. Firstly, in that, they're pretty much your typical gangster hoods. This is even to the point that the pair actually wear hoods throughout all of their attacks. They don't have any of the effervescent personality that the pair have here, and in my opinion, they're some of the best henchmen in the series. In the text, they're the Spang's top hoods, with Wint being described as being a real sadist. The most notable thing about him is the wart on his thumb, which he likes to suck when he's angry or anxious. This actually ends up giving him away in the book, as on the boat, Bond spots a man doing this and then remembers where he last saw that. Wint apparently hates travelling and gets car sick pretty easily. He sees planes as death traps and demands extra money for jobs involving them. As for Kid, he's described as a pretty boy. Felix says that the pair probably shacked up together and that some of the hoods tended to do this, so they always had someone to confide in. The book tells us that Kid's nickname's Buffy, and this was the nickname of one of Fleming's real-life pals. That was Arthur Buffy Gore, who wasn't gay in real life. However, his brother was, and he took his own life in 1958. After this, Arthur campaigned to decriminalise homosexuality. From what I can gather, Ian was just doing his usual tricks of taking his best friends' names for his characters, and there was no harm intended, though some people have said that, he was poking fun at him and his brother. It often gets brought up as a point of contention, but personally, I think it's just a tragic coincidence. On a happier note, the pair are brought to screen by Putter Smith and Bruce Glover. If the latter looks familiar, well, that's because it's Crispin Glover's father, and the pair look almost identical. Inspired by Momo and Ernest from Shoot the Piano Player, I love the riff that accompanies them every time they're on screen. They just seem like they're constantly having a blast with it killing and relishing in all the aspects of doing it. The pair have a real dark sense of humour and at points even finish each other's sentences.
The scorpion.
Mother Nature's finest killer, Mr. Wint.
One is never too old to learn from a master, Mr. Kid.
I don't know, there's just a sophistication about the entire thing and how they kind of get lost in their little conversations around murder.
If God had wanted man to fly,
he would have given him wings, Mr. Kid.
I remember when I was a kid, excuse the pun, I remember when I was a kid and seeing it for the first time when the pair were holding hands. And I was at an age where I didn't really know what being gay was. The movie just kind of implies it and leaves things completely ambiguous. There's been a lot of back and forth over the years about them being problematic characters, but then a ton of people in the gay community saying how endearing that they are. License to Queer has done a brilliant article about their portrayal being a positive and kind of showing that people were gay without it being something to laugh at or mock. As a straight man, I think they avoid the stereotypes and make them really capable, and yeah, like I've said, some of the best henchmen that we've seen so far, and in the series in general. Anyway, this is all going down to the backdrop of Sir Donald's narration. We then see them meet with the next woman up the chain, who just so happens to be a sweet, sweet old lady. Reading a story for the kids, we then see this grandmotherly teacher is in on the racket as well. Joining Wint and Kid inside, they then continue with the deal. You might notice Wint spraying himself with some aftershave, and later he does this on the airplane. This is what also later gives him away to Bond. Now, we don't see what happens to this woman in her death, but at Amsterdam, we see her getting fished out the canal.
I have to bring back some pictures of the canals for the children.
Yes.
While she's getting pulled out, Wint and Kid stand watching by, and they take pictures for the kids, which is a detail I love that builds nicely off that line. Before that though, Bond takes on the identity of Peter Franks. Described in the book as a man who went wrong and stayed wrong, the film is played by Joe Robinson. Robinson was a bodybuilder, and he was initially up for the role of Red Grant in From Russia with Love. He then taught Connery judo on You Only Live Twice, and Sir Sean recommended him for the part in this movie. He doesn't actually die in the book, and in the end just gets held by MI6. For the film though, we get him stopped just before the ferry and get a little appearance by Moneypenny. Lois Maxwell was almost recast for the movie as she had been holding out for a bit more money, Penny. She felt typecast, and also that the Bond shoots had held her back from taking other jobs, especially for such a small part. So she was written out the script, but they decided to bring her in at the very last minute. Because of that though, they needed to basically quickly shove her in, and thus she gets this very minor cameo. Disguising herself as a customs officer, it's a brief scene, but just great seeing her walk out, and it instantly lets you know what's going on. And it's a great cameo. Maxwell had also been shooting Endless Nights around this time, which she had to dye her hair black on. Thus, they gave her a hat, but overall, I don't think you'd notice unless you're a loser.
What can I bring you back from Holland?
A diamond? In a ring?
Would you settle for a tulip?
Yes.
They then escort Franks out and she gives him his ID. Taking his car, he then travels out to Miss T. Case, the first American Bond girl. In the book, her first words are asking whether Bond's the help, and she instantly commands the story.
Well, that's quite a nice little nothing you're almost wearing. I approve.
I don't dress for the hired help.
Wearing a blonde wig at first, this is what her hair colour is in the book.
Weren't you blonde when I came in?
Could be.
I tend to notice little things like that, whether a girl is a blonde or a brunette.
And which do you prefer?
Oh, providing the collars and cuffs match.
Now, as with Tiffany Case, the book tells us a lot about her tragic past. The reason I got called Tiffany is because when I was born, dear Father Case was so sore I wasn't a boy, he gave my mother $1,000 and a powder case from Tiffany's and walked out. So Tiffany Case is in memory of that. Her dad then joined the Marines and was killed at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Her mother got them through it by setting up a string of call girls before it was then busted up by the gangs. Her mother passed away and Tiffany then had to make it on her own. Becoming a vagrant, she was sexually assaulted by several men and had a really difficult childhood. However, she learned the skills of the streets. Tiffany was eventually taken in by an elderly woman who looked after her, and she set out making a living in the casinos. The mafia educated her on how to cut cards and shuffle the odds in her favor. Eventually, she became embroiled in a smuggling ring, which takes us to the story. Now in the film, she says she got that name because her mother went into labor in Tiffany's and she was born on the shop floor. Personally, I prefer the telling in the book as it shows she's a victim of circumstance who's went through the worst of it. Tiffany was written to be a tough girl, much in the same vein as Pussy Galore, and she's very smart and sassy.
Good. Then we can start by saving the cute remarks until after you get the diamonds into Los Angeles.
She's a real match for Bond for like the first 2 acts of the movie. Taking away his fingerprints to check that he's Peter Franks, I love the fact that Q's planned ahead. However, Q also gives Bond a warning. Peter Franks has escaped and he's making his way to Amsterdam.
Killed one of the guards on the way up to London.
Hello?
Now, you might also notice a car in the background here that's getting fitted up with missiles. That is the beautiful Aston Martin DBS, which returns from on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Though extremely brief, it's just a nice carryover to connect the two films and remind us that yes, this is the same character. Though we never get to see these missiles, it's kind of just a nice joke to hint at the constant gadgets that Q-Lab carries. Anyway, Franks arrives in the night, and Bond waits for him pretending to be a couple kissing, which always kind of killed me, and yeah, I'd be lying if I hadn't tried to do this myself. Feigning an accent, he goes up in an elevator with Franks. It's Connery for once, doing a voice that isn't Scottish, which yeah, is a rarity, because like, even when he's playing a Russian, he's still being Scottish.
You are English?
Yes, I'm English.
I speak English. Who is your floor?
Leads to a great fight, but Bond Mr. Magoo's it by smashing some glass by accident. This alerts Peter he's about to hit him, and it's kind of clumsy, and he almost has his head taken off because of it. Ultimately, Bond wins out though, and the ID switch is then played upon again. He puts his a Playboy card on Franks' body, and thus people will think Bond's been beat.
You've just killed James Bond.
Is that who it was?
Now, there's always two kind of Bond types beyond just your different actors. One version is where he's a low-key spy, and the other is where he's a world-famous assassin, with this clearly being the latter. Personally, I think if you're a secret agent, it kind of becomes a bit pointless, and I'm glad it's not used in that many movies. Like, even on His Majesty's Secret Service, which I just finished reading this morning, Bond basically says he doesn't want to get knighted even after saving King Charles's life because it will make him famous and then he won't be able to be a spy again. So yeah, just glad it's not touched upon that much. Using Franks to smuggle out the diamonds, we then meet Felix Leiter at the airport. In the timeline of the books, this is actually the first time you've seen him since the shark attack in Live and Let Die. Bond notices he's being followed and something grabs at his pistol. Looking down to see a steel hook, as a reader, you're immediately on edge. However, we then get the reveal that it's Felix, who's been using this since losing his hand. The pair laugh, and in terms of the story, yeah, it's great knowing Bond's best friend's back, especially as his fate was kinda left up in the air after Live and Let Die. Even at the end, Bond gets a little lump in his throat watching his friend limp off at the airport after getting him to safety, and I did as well. Here Felix is played by Norman Burton, and he's kind of like one of the mid-tier Felixes for me. Felix then asks where the diamonds are, and Bond says,
"Elementary, Dr. Leiter."
That's the alimentary canal, or basically the line that runs from your mouth to your arse. The producers were worried that no one would get this and thus wanted the line cut. But then test audiences burst out laughing, so yeah, they relented and kept it in. Here Bond then gets a lift from the gangsters, with one of them being played by Mark Lawrence. Lawrence later plays the mobster in The Man with the Golden Gun, and in my headcanon, they're the same character. In the book, we have a big connection to Goldfinger, as there the villain works with the Spangled Mob, or at least its remnants. The Spang brothers are the villains in this book, with those being the heads at the opposite ends of the pipeline. In the book, we get lots of the travelling, all explained in detail. Like there's even a moment where Bond brushes his arm against a beautiful blonde and thinks about her in detail. Oop, I touched a girl. No idea why it's in there, but I do feel like Fleming is just kind of filling up the word count. It's down to the most minute detail, even describing every passenger on the plane. And we never see these people again. Fleming kind of loses himself a bit, and he even has a point where Bond huffs on some oxygen at an airport. None of it's needed, and if you've read it, then you will know it kind of drags down the book, in my opinion, if it's your opinion. But you might love it. But yeah, there's like a big section where he basically says what Bond had for breakfast, and you're kind of thinking, what's the point in this? I know people like the travelogue stuff, but I do think this is the lowest point of it, and it's kind of Fleming just telling people about experiences that he's had, as back then, you know, everyone didn't know every single thing that every single person on the planet was thinking at every second of the day. The dialogue in the car is hilarious though.
I got a brother.
Small world.
Taken to Slumber Inc., Ken Adams said he visited several funeral homes in Vegas and was taken aback by the very tacky decor. This then inspired the set here, and I am a bit surprised they didn't just go on location, mate. Save yourself a bit of dough. Bond then basically hands over the diamonds to the next smuggler in the chain, and this is Shady Trees. He comes directly from the book, with his name actually being the title of chapter 7. Shady Trees is actually a nod to Shecky Green, who was a real-life Vegas entertainer. That's kind of the role he has here, but in the book, Tiff says he's not as fun as he sounds. There he helps run the House of Diamonds and is the mobster who wants Bond to fix the horse race. In the movie, Wint and Kid then make an attempt on Bond's life, with them going to cremate him alive, which is pretty terrifying. According to IMDb trivia, this is the last scene that Connery shot, so his final time as Bond could have potentially been the character being loaded into a coffin, which I'm sure felt symbolic at the time. Luckily, he's saved by Shady, who tells him the diamonds are fake.
You dirty double-crossing limey think those goddamn diamonds are phonies.
Felix currently possesses the real ones, and thus Bond's saved from death. I love how they're just questioning where the real diamonds are though, rather than being like, why is this guy being cremated alive? Going to Vegas, we then discover Trees, a stand-up comedian at the White House. On the left-hand side of the magazine, we can also spot Sammy Davis Jr. He actually filmed a scene for the movie where he went back and forth over his contract at the hotel. Asking Burt Saxby to go up and talk to Willard White, this is where we learned White hadn't been seen for 3 years. Bond then entered, and we got this little joke about him.
They ain't never gonna get a cake big enough to put him on top of. Hey, wait a minute. What happened to the chips? I lost.
This is Bond donning that iconic white jacket that he first wore in the opening of Goldfinger. Again, trying to recapture that. I love this look though, and if you'd like to dress like Bond, then why not check out our partners at Anthony Sinclair. They run 6 decades of Bond collection which has suits from over the eras. They also have these camp collar shirts from Thunderball which I've been rocking all summer. Elliot and the team are some incredible tailors who really put customer service above everything else and make you feel like you're part of the family. So definitely go check them out, and yeah, they're the best suits I've ever worn. We then see Winton Kid going to Tree to carry out his murder. In the film he talks about how he hasn't changed his act in decades. We then cut, however there's a deleted scene that showed this playing out, and initially they joked by holding him up with a fake gun. This had a flag pop out that says "Bang, you're dead," which Tree says is a very terrible joke. The trigger then gets pulled again, which fires a real bullet, and they execute Tree right there in his dressing room. For the final cut though, we then just get Saxby asking where he is, and they say,
"We didn't get the real diamonds, so we need Tree alive."
That's most annoying.
Now the book has a big section where Felix discusses the casinos. In a lot of the books, Bond talks about how the ones who tip the odds in their favors will have 2 zeros on the roulette wheel. It all keeps the neon lights shining, and the women at the slots who scream jackpot like it's the name of a lover. Felix warns Bond he has to play by the rules, and he talks about a card cheat who was found buried in the desert with his arms sticking out the sand. There he was holding a pack of cards and a clear warning to the others. They have lights with cameras in watching the floor, players, and also the dealers. The floors have this feeling of sophistication, but there's shadows behind all the glitz and glamour. Everyone smiles to your face, but secretly they're wanting to rob you blind. Bond then talks about how the slot machines are like a mousetrap that lure in simple people who hate what they're doing. The women stand at the machines like hens at a battery farm and wait for the occasional silvery waterfall. Felix then goes into how the hoods used to run the streets and now they run the government. They practically control all of Nevada, and it's an incredible chapter that really sets the tone of the book. Now on the floor is where we get our first tease of Blofeld as he's running things from the control room. He's wearing his classic Blofeld suit and is also shot in a similar way to how he was first introduced in the franchise. Back in From Russia with Love, when the credits simply had his name as a question mark, he'd often be framed with a focus on just his hands, which I do appreciate. In the movie, Bond then meets Plenty O'Toole and the pair go up to his room.
Hi, I'm Plenty.
But of course you are.
Plenty O'Toole.
Named after your father, perhaps?
Probably like the funniest name in the franchise, and the peak of character names, I'd say, that kind of made this an even more ridiculous stereotype than Pussy Galore. Initially, there was also another scene here where the pair went for dinner at a luxurious restaurant. It had a giant pool and harp playing in the background, with Bond even turning down the wine.
No good.
Hey, I didn't think you could really do that. I bet they charge you for it.
Tiffany even asks if he's a knight and then notices the harp players giving flirty eyes to Bond. So they then go up to his room. Bond undoes her dress, and years later ABC would CGI underwear back onto her in order to avoid controversy, which in itself ended up causing some controversy. Things don't get too hot though as Bond turns on the light and they're then met by mobsters. They end up throwing Plenty out the window, which is when we get this great joke.
Exceptionally fine shot.
I didn't know there was a pool down there.
They kinda Hugh Jackman'd this for the Wolverine, and this scene always reminds me I need to rewatch that movie.
How did you know there's a pool down there?
I didn't.
Making the best of a bad situation, Bond then finds Tiffany's in bed waiting. They do the classic cut to her having a cigarette, with Bond even having an ashtray on his chest. Calvin Dyson's done a great video about smoking in the Bond movies and all the things behind the scenes that ended up changing things. Connery had stopped smoking 3 years prior and had gone completely cold turkey. Calvin theorized they didn't want to force him to do it since he was so difficult to get back, and this was also during a time in which health dangers were becoming more and more publicized. Due to the real diamonds still being out there, she wants to grab them and then run away, but they have to pick them up from the circus, which is where we go to next. Now in the book, it's kind of the gripping espionage of From Russia with Love, whereas in the movie, we're watching an elephant win on a slot machine. We also get the water pistol scene with the kid, which I've always quite liked, and yeah, it is funny that they've got like balloon fixing going on. But see kids, in the book, the mobster fixes a horse race and burns a jockey alive for missing it, and in the movie, they're fixing balloon games. Nah, but the kid's furious she cheated, and then Tiff gets the diamonds and makes a break for it. Going back to her house, she finds Bond and Plenty in the pool. Now, this was actually expanded upon in another deleted scene. Plenty actually snuck back into the room to get her clothes, which is when she found Bond in bed with Tiffany. She then looked through her stuff and found her address, which is when she went to confront her. Here, Wint and Kid thought she was Tiffany, so they drowned her in the pool. Obviously again though, this is pretty sad looking back and an eerie case of real life mirroring art. The house itself also belonged to Kirk Douglas, who rented it out to the production. Bond then ends up hitting Tiff to get the info, and yeah, it's another one of those things with Connery that I think hasn't aged well. Either way, she tells him the diamonds have been passed on, which leads Bond to Area 51. Well, I say that, but you know what I mean. Sneaking in the back of a van, I love how the driver behind him doesn't even flag it up. Couldn't give a shit. Either way, this takes us to the secret facility in the desert. This is Willard White Tektronics, which specializes in space travel. This is where the diamonds will be compiled into the satellite, and then it's from here they'll be launched up into space. His cover is a scientist being blown, and he ends up interrupting the moon landing set. Which, yeah, and he then heads out in a buggy. It is funny though that even in 1971, there were big films like this saying the moon landing was fake. I think it's just kind of an excuse to have Bond drive a moon buggy and then that desert bike thing. The interior here was filmed at the B stage of Pinewood Studios, whereas the chase was in the desert of Las Vegas. I do like the uniforms that the security guards have here though, as it always reminds me of the guards in Dr. Evil's base. Also, love the dismount that Connery does off the bike, where he just gets off without breaking stride and then lets it just carry on driving. Even to the point where we still see it going when we pull away in Tiff's car. Now, though I've been slagging off this movie and how I didn't like it as a kid, I have to say, mate, 13-year-old me used to do this on this bike every single day. I was James Bond. Heading back to Las Vegas, we then get a fantastic chase in Tiff's red Ford Mustang. Ford provided all the cars in the chase, however, they had one specific demand. Due to Goldfinger skyrocketing the sales of Aston Martin, they said Bond had to drive their new 71 Mustang, which is why Connery's behind the wheel. I always appreciated the slick stunt driving in the scene, and watching the car park choreography always impresses me. Everything's just meticulous, and watching them weave in and out of the spaces is really well put together. However, we unfortunately have one of the biggest gaffes in a stunt I've ever seen, and it ruins the movie. Now, so what happens, right, is that Bond drives in the alleyway and then flips the car up onto two wheels. Then the car drives through the narrow alleyway and then comes out the other side. Now, why people are complaining about this piece of shit is because the car goes in on one side and comes out on the opposite wheels. What the hell's wrong? Ruined the movie. Now, this was the fault of the second unit direction team, who weren't keeping an eye on the rest of the footage. The entrance was shot at Universal Studios, with the exit then being shot at Las Vegas. So you can see how lots of stuff got lost, especially as it wasn't like you could just review the footage from the previous day like you would with modern day digital cameras. So they put a quick insert shot in there where the camera's focused on Tiffany and Bond, and it shifts to show them switching sides. Obviously, you know, it makes no sense if the car kind of rocks like that, especially when it's down a narrow space, but I do understand when stuff goes wrong. Not that I've filmed stuff to this extent, but we have had times where we've shot things and then come home to realize we've completely messed it all up. I probably would have just flipped the footage myself and hoped that no one would have noticed it was reversed, but I don't know how easy that was to do in the 70s and if you could even do it. So they at least try to explain it with that insert shot, but I think it's such a slick stunt that I don't really get mad at it. Bond and Tiffany then have a romantic night in the bridal suite, and the pair get it on top of a fish tank.
I won't be long, darling.
Now at this point, Bond heads to the top floor. I love the way Connery smoothly transitions to going out the window and then makes his way along the ledge without ever breaking stride. Just shows how confident, cool, calm and calculated that he is, and we'd later get a direct reference to this in Spectre.
Where are you going?
I won't be long.
It's It's nice to see Bond actually doing Bond stuff, and he ends up grabbing onto the bar and holding on. This feels like something that was given a nod to in Skyfall when Bond does something similar. I love the piton and also the swing he creates to get in the room. He looks cool, calm and casual, but in the original script, he came across extremely nervous, even muttering the line, "Q, if I fall, I'll kill you." Landing on the toilet throne, it's here Bond realizes he's in the poop.
Good evening, Mr. Bond. Blofeld.
Yes, Blofeld is alive. To make matters worse, he's got more doubles and Bonds end up shooting the wrong one. Now, as we touched upon earlier, it was the Spangs who were the villain in the work. Bond followed the pipeline to Serafino Spang, who's the agent that he runs into in the barbers. He's clearly furious at all the money he's been losing, and he ends up slapping a hairdresser after she nicks him. He screams, "Fire that bitch!" at the boss and then storms out furious, which Bond takes great pleasure in. Upon leaving, Bond meets with his driver Ernie Cuneo, who was named after Fleming's real-life pal that helped on Thunderball. He's a big part of the book and basically gives Bond a rundown of the history of Vegas. Rammed off the road by the mobsters, Bond's finally caught by the gang. This is when he's taken to Spectreville, which is far out in the desert. It's basically like the set of Westworld and a recreation of an old town, complete with a saloon and timely music playing slightly out of tune on the piano. Bond then ends up fighting with some of the mobsters, and then he hears Tiffany saying cut. Looking about, he realizes it's almost like a stage show with Bond fighting for their entertainment. Spang's dressed up in an old cowboy costume, and though Bond thinks he should look ridiculous, he actually doesn't. Spang then gets wind to make Bond a drink, and he tries to come up with excuses for why he's been constantly undercutting the gang. One of the big problems that the mob has with him is that he took the money they paid him and then rinsed them at the casino. Bond says he's perfectly within his right to gamble, but that's when Spang says cut the crap. Turns out he's received a telegram from London that says Peter Franks has been detained, eliminate substitute. Now, before he punishes him, he wants to know why he carries a gun, why he rides with a phony cabbie, and why he was with the phony jockey. Ultimately, he tells the boys to go and get the boots, and you get your classic Bond book torture scene. Calling it a Brooklyn stomping, they basically put on football boots and then kick the crap out of him. He's horribly beaten up and left completely at death's door. I'll talk about what this leads to in the book in just a moment, because I want you guys to feel some tension, but in the movie, Blofeld basically boasts about his plan. Using a voice box, he's held Willard White hostage for years. Now, Bond has a 50-50 chance of getting the right one, and he uses his bolt gun to try and kill the villain. I love the way it's kind of a bear, which is fitting with this casino setting. Bond comes out the loser though, and he chooses the wrong one and then gets told to go to the elevator. However, there is a clue throughout the movie in which you can tell which one's the real Blofeld. All the duplicates refer to Bond as 007, whereas the real Blofeld refers to him as Bond.
Good evening, Mr. Bond. Blofeld. Good evening, 007. Double jeopardy, Mr. Bond. Right idea, Mr. Bond.
Calling him Bond is just more of a personal touch and shows the pair know each other on that level. Bond's then gassed and Wint and Kidd take him to the pipeline to bury him so that he gets killed by a pipe cleaner, I think. I don't know, mate, it's pretty convoluted, and yeah, if you've got a whole private floor, you've got all this stuff, why don't you just kill him there and then bury the body in the desert?
Why?
Why not?
Why?
The rat scene is pretty fun though, and this would too get reference in Spectre with the mouse at l'Americaine. It's here Bond picks up on the aftershave, which gets dropped in the boot, and this eventually gives Wint and Kidd away.
Thank you very much. I was just out walking my rat and I seem to have lost my way.
Back at the hotel, Blofeld gets a call from what seems to be Bert Saxby. However, Q's reverse engineered the voice changer, and it's in this they find out where White is. Q also says,
Not a bit of it. Made one of these for the kids last Christmas.
This was actually what they used for reference in James Bond Jr., with a character IQ being Q's direct descendant. Or his grandson, look, it was one of them, but he's got kids. We've established that in the canon. He's gonna have grandkids in James Bond Jr. Bond then travels out to where White is, and we get a showdown against Bambi and Thumper. It gives us a unique fight that we haven't really seen in a Bond movie, where they use their gymnastics to overpower the agent. Kind of thematically follows on from Wint and Kidd, and is sort of a female equivalent to the whole dual henchman thing. They toy with him and take their time, and basically are some of the most memorable antagonists Bond's ever faced off against. They get dunked in the end, and I always thought this scene was one of the most fun in the film, especially with the acrobatics. Having rescued Willard White, you then get the feeling he's been holed up here for years. And yeah, with Bambi and Thumper, lock me up and throw away the key. Upon leaving, Saxby tries to make a hit on White's life, and ultimately we see another villain killed.
Tell him he's fired.
Cutting to the casino, we see Q basically robbing the place blind. Guy's got something that can win on the slots, and you'd have saved Bond a lot of trouble in the past if you could just automatically win stuff here. This was also actually what Desmond Llewellyn said was the gadget he wished he could get in real life. None of that other shit, just something I could use to cheat at the casinos. It's here that Tiffany spots Blofeld's cat and she decides to get herself captured. This kinda never made sense to me, as she actually hasn't seen the cat in the movie. So yeah, just following a random cat. Blofeld's also disguised as a woman, which is no doubt a trick you learn from the opening of Thunderball. Either way, we then travel out to the desert facility and get an appearance by Shane Rimmer. Shane appeared in lots of other Bond movies, including The Spy Who Loved Me. He often played a control room officer, and Nolan even ended up casting him in Batman Begins as the controller of the monorails at Wayne Tower, which I think we've talked about several times before, but we're being thorough. The satellite has now been launched though, and Blofeld's got a frickin' giant laser. Holding the world to ransom, we see it's capable of blowing up subs in rockets. Now, this looks terrible, but there is a reason. Due to Connery's salary, they actually had to cut back on the special effects, which is why a lot of the movie looks so cheap. Bond and White then realize Blofeld's on an oil rig due to Willard not actually owning one in Baja. Bond then heads out there, and I love his entrance in the inflatable ball. It allows him to walk across the water, and he arrives all suited and booted. His parachuting in as well is also very similar to some of the astronaut landings from the time. He then finds Tiffany working on her tan in a worse ways you could be holed up. Unfortunately, I think at this point in the script, she kind of turns into an idiot. I don't know if Bond slapping her earlier messed with her brain, but she's just sort of reduced to being a bit of a moron. It's a similar thing to what happens with Goodnight and Golden Gun, and as soon as they hit the villain's lair, they just lose all brain power. Bond then tries to switch the tape in the machine, which is the character's true mission. Blofeld just lets him walk over to it and pop it out, and yet, considering he shot an explosive cigarette at some control banks in You Only Live Twice, I think Blofeld is a bit of an idiot for even letting him go near it. Just kill him. He then wants to smuggle out the real tape with Tiffany, but she ends up putting it back in the machine. Bond also ties his shoelace and then sets off a weather balloon, which is basically him calling in the cavalry. They're just morons. I love how they just let him wander around constantly messing stuff up, and yeah, everyone here deserves their downfall, and I hope you've all got a very painful death. Thank you. In a moment that looks like it's ripped right out of Apocalypse Now, they then storm the base. Now, it's probably the worst climax so far, and there's no showdown between Blofeld and Bond. Originally, they were going to have the pair duking it out in a diamond mine, with Bond eventually getting the upper hand. Instead, we get Blofeld attempting to escape in a mini-sub, and a guy who's very, very dedicated to his job doing the countdown.
5 minutes and counting. 4 minutes and counting. 3 minutes and counting. 2 minutes and counting. 1 minute and counting.
Like, even when the place is blowing up, the guy's still there counting down, and yeah, this would be parodied in Austin Powers. Tim Burton even gave a nod to it in Batman Returns when he had the poodle lady doing the same thing in the climax.
30 seconds until ignition.
And Breakdown on the channel now. Now, he actually appeared earlier in the movie, and we get that unmistakable voice at the lab.
Orders, Dr. Menz. Will it wait for you?
Right. Out.
Bond eventually messes with Blofeld's crane and smacks him about in the sub. But ultimately, the villain lives to die another day. Eon would then lose the rights to Spectre, and though Blofeld, in quotation marks, showed up in For Your Eyes Only, it would be almost 45 years until Spectre returned in an Eon film. Now in the book, Bond's then woken up from his beating by Tiffany. He's just had a dream about being on a mission with Strangways, who is a character that appears in Dr. No, and he's basically imagining anything to get away from the pain. Upon coming to, she explains she's with him till the end, and though she sat there doing her nails while he was getting his beatings, she says that she was hurting for him. Oh. So, now they're gonna make a break for it, but Bond can't even walk. He does manage to crawl to a platform though, where she's filled a self-starter train with petrol that they can then use to escape. Bond grabs the rest of the can and throws it about before then setting it alight. One thing I've kind of skipped over is that Spang has a train called the Cannonball that Bond says is the most magnificent train he's ever seen. It's your classic Western one and the most prized possession of Serafino Spang. Now that name may have also possibly inspired the name of the villain in No Time to Die, as there we have Seraphine. Either way, they hope they can destroy everything, and yeah, they just dash off into the night. It's here that they see the flames burning down Spectreville, how that the cannonball light appears in the distance, and they know it's coming up the line. Luckily, they have a 15-minute head start, and Tiffany's put in enough petrol to just run forever and ever. Awesome! However, the engine starts to go put. They just write put in the text, which is really good. And the engine crashes out, which then leaves them freewheeling. Absolute nightmare. Slowing down from 25, Bond then watches it go to 20 to 15 to stopping. Diving off, they then turn the tracks and put the cannonball on the branch line, which derails the entire thing. Describing it as a grand coffin hurtling through the night, it screams into the mountain as it crashes. It's an incredible description, and the pair crash out before being rescued by Felix. Saying the mobs put 10 grand on Bond's head, he then gets them to the boat, which is where we go to for the climax of the movie. Waving goodbye, I'm actually wearing Connery's suit here, which smells like plenty O'Toole. I love the pan from the goodbye over to Winton Kid, and we get the final attempt on the pair's lives. The book then has them going for dinner, which is where we learn something about Tiffany's past. Bond thinks about how he's starting to fall in love with her and has been wondering when she's going to drop her waltz. So far, he's seen the dealer, the shill, and the gangster's girlfriend, but not the real her. The book actually gives us, for the first time, the phrase, "We have all the time in the world," which then becomes a staple during Majesties. It feels very much like an epilogue, and the pair have 3 days on the ship. Named the Queen Elizabeth, Bond thinks about how in the war it would have been avoiding U-boats, but now it's a luxury cruise. There's lots of gambling, and Bond goes into how the women dealers tend to do the best. Men think they're sexy, and women think they'll go easy because they're united in sisterhood. But it's always the house winning, and the duo then discuss marriage. It gives an insight into Bond and why he and Tiffany's relationship is doomed. Most marriages don't add two people together. They subtract one from the other. Saying he's married to a man, M, he says he'd have to divorce him before going after a girl. He then taunts Tiffany by saying he didn't realize she and Serafino slept in separate rooms. She storms off, gets a bit angry, and this kind of leads to the cabin scene where Bond has to sneak in and kill Winton Kid. He uses the bed sheet to climb down the outside of the boat and then sneaks into where they're holding Tiff hostage. Bond also has his attaché case for the climax, and he takes the silencer from it, which is obviously, kind of building off when it was introduced in From Russia with Love. In the film, we then get a dinner with death where he dispatches Winton Kid. Along with Bomb's surprise, there are two clues that they aren't who they say they are. Firstly, the wine they give's a claret, but he doesn't know that.
Although for such a grand meal, I had rather expected a claret.
Of course. Unfortunately, our cellar is rather poorly stocked with clarets.
So it just seems like he doesn't know what he's talking about, and neither do I, if that's wrong, mate, because I googled it. There's also a small silver dish around his neck, which is used to check the wine, but yeah, he doesn't end up using it. So he's giving it away, he doesn't know what he's doing. Things then kick off with arms being set on fire, and Bomb Surprise going right up the arse. Which, yeah, is a bit weird, but whatever floats your boat, mate. Killing them both, we then end with Tiffany and Bond looking to the satellite and wondering how they'll get the diamonds down. The book then has an additional chapter where Bond goes out to the dig site from the opening and he arrests a dealer and shoots down the helicopter. This has the other Spang brother inside, and he thinks about how in death, the diamonds in his gun will add no comfort.
James? How the hell do we get those diamonds down again?
Now, we do have a fair idea of what happened to Tiffany after the story. The book From Russia with Love tells us she went off to London with Bond and the pair lived together at his flat. However, Bond finds it difficult living with women, and sinking into a drab life is his biggest fear ever.
I sleep in a racing car. Do you?
I sleep in a big bed with my wife.
Oh.
Happens a fair bit, and basically he can't deal with a normal life. So Tiffany ended up going back to America, with it being described as them having some final painful weeks in which she'd gone to live at a hotel before then leaving for the country and basically breaking his heart, which is quite sad. Hello, I'm joined by Joe Darlington from Being James Bond podcast. I've got your book about being James Bond, which is the guide that everyone needs to pick up from Amazon. Because of wanting to be James Bond, I wanted to discuss with you what happens when an actor doesn't like being James Bond.
Yes, for me, it's finished.
And Sean Connery, he kind of didn't necessarily have a massively public feud with the producers at the time, but obviously in hindsight we know a lot of stuff that's gone down, to the point that he was even working with a competing producer making their own James Bond movie. So if you could offer some insight into what the hell was going on and kind of where they left things off at the end of the movie, because I know Connery was offered
a 2-picture deal as well with United Artists as themselves and myself as partners.
But he only did the one. So if you can tell us why didn't he like being James Bond?
Yeah, that's it. The why is probably very complicated, and I'm sure probably only Connery can tell you exactly the reasons. But and I think you also tend to see it with other actors as well. And I think what they find is that this is not just an acting role. Your whole life is really dedicated to this, and when you're making these movies, it's really incredible. And I think that Connery, he was already getting frustrated by the time he did the fifth one, the You Only Live Twice. And the famous story is that he's in Japan and he's swarmed by paparazzi and people all the time. And at some point he was somewhere in a public place and he went to use the bathroom, and he says he's literally sitting on the bowl and some guy climbs over the top with a camera trying to get a picture of him on the bowl. And I think that was sort of the moment when he snapped. He said, "That's it. I think I'm done with this." And that's it. I'm not. He said, "Never again. I'll never do it again."
Yeah, I do kind of get it though. Not to that scale, obviously, but we've done like breakdown series where I've been, 5 movies into it and I've got like another 5 to go, and I'm like, I just can't be bothered with this anymore. It's not as fun as I thought it would be. But you see, like even with Daniel Craig recently, when he had the had the baby carrier, people were like, well, that's not James Bond. And it's like, yeah, he's not James Bond. He's a person. He's just being a dad. Do you know kind of what the conflicts were on this film and how they left things off at the end? Because obviously he had that with You Only Live Twice and then came back. And I can imagine there was maybe the thought in the producer's mind that he was going to stick around. But obviously, they did have a good time on the set as well. It sounds a lot less chaotic. Do you know kind of what the rigmarole behind that was?
Again, I think he was fed up with doing it, and the bottom line is, I think he said, "I'll only do it for a certain amount of money." And
I had an opportunity in doing this film, Diamonds Are Forever, for an amount of money for the trust, which I can't disclose now on the program, but it was my fee. And with this, I could launch the trust with so much money that there could never be an excuse for it not succeeding.
The tragedy for me is that they followed up You Only Live Twice with one of the greatest James Bond films of all time, which is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. George Lazenby came in, and it was a couple of factors there, because George Lazenby was not. He was even he will tell you he was young, he was a little full of himself. He fancied himself a little more. One of the famous stories is that there was a party on set for some of the crew who had been working so hard, and I think it was Dana Broccoli who was putting this together. They put the flyers all over the place saying come to the party at this time or whatever, and George starts pouting, and they're like, well, what's wrong, what's the matter? And he says, well, I didn't get invited. And they're like, everybody's invited. Everyone is invited. That was pretty clear. He goes, yeah, but I should have got like a personal invitation. I'm the star of the movie. And Cubby Broccoli just wasn't having it. He's like, listen, you 25-year-old nobody, you're not a star until the people tell you you're a star. So step off your high horse. So there was that. Plus the film, it didn't get the response that they were hoping for, because it was again, people are used to Sean Connery. I mean, Sean Connery's the man. Who's George Lazenby at this point?
I think one had made the point too with the lack of success of the one previous, the one that I wasn't in anywhere. And coming back in to do this one, the wicket was better for me to make the conditions of not being so much a pawn in the circumstances.
So I think if Lazenby stuck around and did some more, he would have done some fantastic work.
Yeah,
but
he didn't really get the chance. Yeah.
Right, it just wasn't in the cards. So basically, the producers are desperate, and they're like, look, we need Sean Connery if these are going to work. So they basically said, listen, we will give you a salary that no one has ever received before. So he got this enormous salary to do one more. and he wouldn't commit to doing another one after that, and that was sort of the end of that.
No, no, I came back for the one. That was the understanding, and I'd do the one, and I've got other things I want to do.
It does make you wonder, what is the logic of trying to pull him back for when you know it's just one more, and you know
Yeah.
he's already kind of getting up there. I mean, it's again, Connery would go on to have like another prime after that, frankly, where I think he was probably even more a better actor and as well received, if not maybe more so as he got older. But by the time Diamonds comes around, I mean, you can see this is not the same young guy from Doctor No. So it does make you question the thinking there.
Yeah, I see it very similar to what's going on with Marvel right now, where it's like, we'll get Robert Downey Jr. back, we'll get the Russo brothers back. We know that it's not going to last forever, but it's clearly just trying to get as much goodwill towards the franchise as possible.
It's going to wring as much water out of that sponge as they possibly can.
I wasn't alive for this, but I can imagine there was a lot of flux around the franchise because you'd had, with Roger Moore taking on Live and Let Die, you'd had 3 different actors playing Bond across 3 different movies, and 4 different actors if you count You Only Live Twice as being like every single movie's alternating actors. What was it like going from Diamonds Are Forever to You Only Live Twice?
Yeah, I mean it's before my day too, thankfully. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that. I was actually born in '69, which is the year that On Her Majesty's Secret Service came out. But yeah, I mean, you have to imagine it is pretty jarring, and the producers are asking themselves big time, what is the lasting power of James Bond? Is this something that we can keep going forever? Which I think most of the people back then, if you asked them, they probably would have said no. Lazenby clearly felt that this was going to be a one-shot deal, that the whole James Bond thing was sort of fading away because of, again, we're kind of getting to the era of like Easy Rider and,
Yeah.
we're going into the 70s and it's a little different. Yeah, I think everybody was sort of wondering what the deal was. But yeah, to your point, honestly, you go from You Only Live Twice, which is Connery, to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is Lazenby, Diamonds Are Forever, which is Connery again, and then we go to Roger Moore. So you had literally 4 films in a row with different actors. Yeah, it is a pretty wild time. And again, I think a lot of people at this point are wondering, is this thing sustainable?
Yeah, and I wasn't calling you old there, by the way, saying like, you tell me
I don't
what
mind,
it was
it's
like
okay.
you were around those days. But yeah, I do think this is a bit of a weird film tonally, and kind of especially the bounce back from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, going from like a very straight-edged, hard thing, and then you expect the next film to be like a revenge quest, and Bond at his like lowest point, just off the rails. How do you feel about the film overall?
I always have to sort of predicate and say, listen, there are no such thing as bad Bond films, and my least favorite Bond film is still, still wonderful and everything. The disclaimer out of the way. Yeah, Diamonds is kind of my least favorite of the bunch. It's a film that's not trying to. You almost have to ask yourself what are they trying to do? Because it does, like you said, it goes from this kind of, I wouldn't say hard boiled, but at least a very grounded film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which has universal themes to it. I think most people can respond to. It's a movie with a lot of heart, in my opinion. And then it goes to Diamonds, and it's sort of funny because it comes out swinging as if this is going to be a revenge film, and it's almost like. You can't tell if they're trying to directly connect it to On Her Majesty's or maybe indirectly because they keep things very vague, they don't reference Tracy, etc. So, but it comes out strong and then it kind of gets a little silly and it just sort of stays in that little silly spot. I have learned to sort of enjoy Diamonds Are Forever because it also takes me back to a different time. I live with my mother-in-law and she loves watching the game shows from the 70s, and we watch Match Game all the time. And I don't know if you've seen that show, but it's funny because it takes you back to times when people were they were smoking. There was a lot of kissing. There's a lot of, it's very much more relaxed time than we have today. So in that respect, I've kind of learned to appreciate this film like it's junk food, it's pizza. And just seeing like the clothing, like we kind of went to like the really wide lapels and the pink ties and things like that. So yeah, it's a fun, silly sort of time capsule of a film, but doesn't deliver a lot of punch that I'm sort of looking for from a James Bond film.
Yeah, I feel that way as well. And I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. It's kind of a good history lesson. And if you guys at home, definitely pick up the book, Being James Bond. Joseph Darlington is James Bond. Nearly call you James Bond yourself there. But excellent read. It basically goes through all the practical things that you'd need to do to be James Bond and whether it is even possible. I like to think of myself as being James Bond.
But you got to read the second line after that. Joseph Darlington is James Bond, and it says, well, he wishes he was.
Yeah, I think as Bond fans, we all kind of do, which is why I think it's so interesting to talk about when an actor who gets to play that doesn't necessarily want to do it anymore. And there's definitely the side of it where you think, you know, be careful what you wish for because it opens up a media storm. And yeah, just seeing Connery talking about spending half the day shooting and half the day answering questions on set. It's a big, big thing. It's a big responsibility. At the moment, we don't know who the next James Bond's going to be, but good luck to whoever that is. And yeah, it might even be you if they pick up the book and say, oh, we found the guy. But yeah, make sure you guys at home pick up the book as well. You're really going to enjoy reading it. It's such a fun little book. And it's nice pocket edition as well, so you can carry it around. And if you see an Aston Martin or something, get it out and read it. But yeah, thank you for joining me. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
Now, as for my thoughts on the movie, I think this has become somewhat of a guilty pleasure. Having hated it initially, I've softened on it recently. That includes the book as well. Now, I still think this is the weakest of the Eon Bond movies so far, and you could argue that the best thing to come out of it was Jay-Z's verse on the Diamonds remix, but I still think it's a fun time. Whether it's the charismatic killers in Winton Kid, the tongue-in-cheek humor of the plot, or just the tour of Las Vegas, I enjoyed this watch through. I think the first two acts are pretty strong, but when we get to the oil rig and the space laser thing, just starts to fall apart. At points, this kind of feels like a TV movie rather than a fully fledged production. And I do think it suffers because of this. We go from quite a grounded assassination tale and watch the Diamond's entire journey. It goes from being in someone's mouth through several countries and then up to the laser in space. And along the way, it kind of loses its direction. Though I think the moon landing stuff is pretty funny while watching it, it's also like, what's this here for? Things like the stand-up comedian, can get a bit confusing when you're not paying full attention. This is by far the most convoluted plot we'd had so far, and even after doing it, I'm still not sure of all the machinations involved. Las Vegas can also make stuff feel tacky and low budget, and it's just not to the level of what we've seen before, even if I'm enjoying it. Last time I got slated a bit for saying I didn't enjoy Her Majesty's Secret Service that much, and yeah, even with my comments, I'm not putting this above that. I do think this is the worst of the main run, but there's still a fair bit to enjoy from it. So yeah, this has given me a new appreciation for the film, even if I still think it's Connery's worst and the lowest point thus far, discounting that Casino Royale film. This marked quite a weird time in the franchise though, and it was in a major state of flux. Bring Back Connery had pretty much just kicked the can down the road because everyone knew he wasn't returning. Though it grossed $116 million off a $7 million budget, things were still worrying. The next film would see us getting a third actor in the role in just 3 films. Would fans want more, or would they abandon the franchise? Well, you guys already know that because we're still talking about it like 60 years later, but I'm very excited to dive into this brand new era. Either way, that wraps up the video, and huge thank you for your constant support on the series. Coming into it, I knew this was going to be the point that I struggle with doing these breakdowns the most. I've seen your comments though about not giving up, and they've pushed me on, and trust me, like Bond, I'm here to focus on the job and see it through to the end. We've also shot some stuff for the following films, all the way up to Never Say Never Again at this point, and even done some stuff with the V8 from The Living Daylights and No Time to Die. So just want to reassure you, we're here for the long haul, and I hope you guys continue on this journey with me. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos? If you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else, and it just means we can do big elaborate videos like this. Huge thank you to everyone who's done that, and if you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown on screen right now. Out of the way though, huge thank you for clicking this. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.